maybe there's scope for another big signing. Maybe there is scope for a signing that is the £40-odd million mark, which isn't amazing in this day and age.
Yeah, I'd say there's kind of three categories that United are recruiting in. So there's
Jay here for Stretford Paddock. This is Academy Review, which means joining me as always is Academy Scoop himself, Finn. How are we doing, Finn? You good?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
I'm all right, man. I'm excited because this is my favourite part of the season, when there's no football.
Yeah.
This is what I love. When there's no football matches, it's all about transfers. And that's why we're going to do something a little bit different on Academy Review this week. You're going to do almost like a sort of scouting report on young players you think United could potentially sign this summer, especially young players on a bit of a budget.
We're going to get lost in the hypotheticals.
Lost
today.
in the Hypotheticals, which is the name of, I think, was that the name of your second album for the band that you were in?
No, it was the name of the band.
Oh, name of the band, sorry, Lost in the Hypotheticals. You can go and check them out on Spotify. Yeah, because United have done this, haven't they? You've spoken about it a lot on Academy Review. Players like Hayden Hackney, who did a very good sort of scouting report for us. Patrick Dorgu cost a little bit more, but that kind of thing of buying players sort of for a little bit less, who are a little bit younger. The sort of the most obvious one was Chido Obi, who came in from Arsenal at a very young age. I think it was his 16 when we got him, and he's already making moves in the first team. So we're going to look at some potential players from around Europe, I think it's safe to say,
I think Ineos have a bit of a balancing act to do because obviously early on in the window they've got Cunha done, they want to bring in Mbumo, and those represent first team ready options that can make an impact right now, but obviously financially you have to balance that with some players who maybe represent long-term potential that you can sign a little bit cheaper. Yeah.
So we'll get straight into it. A player I've seen you mention on X, I think you've been asked about him on X. I saw someone was tweeting you. Let's call it Twitter. Really? You know what Twitter, I mean? Yeah. It's still Twitter. Someone was tweeting you about it, asking you about him. Hayden Hackney from Middlesbrough, central midfielder. What can you tell us about him?
The big kind of attraction with Hayden Hackney is he is a progressive monster in the midfield. So yeah, really high quality central midfielder, plays in the Championship for Middlesbrough until recently under Carrick, of course. And there's already been some comparisons between the way they kind of progress the ball forward in terms of their passing, long range, and kind of the way they stay composed under pressure in the midfield. He's been scouted by a lot of Premier League clubs. I think especially in recent years it's become more and more apparent how much quality there is in the Championship if you know where to look and who to identify as that talent. A big comparison he's been getting is to Adam Wharton, who's of course been fantastic for Crystal Palace since joining from Blackburn. They're very similar in the way they just progress the ball relentlessly. It's, Hackney is in the 99th and 98th percentile for forward and progressive passes respectively. So statistically he tops basically any progressive metric you can find. That's for Europe's top 5 leagues and the Championship. And so what you're getting in him is so much quality on the ball, not necessarily a particularly defensive-minded player. So you couldn't, for example, pair him with Bruno Fernandes and be completely comfortable defensively, despite obviously having a back three behind them. He would be, if United were to bring him in, he'd be more of a kind of Bruno backup or alternative that you could bring in and rotate throughout a season. But there's definitely a lot of clubs interested in him because of his skill set, which is, for the price you could get him at, which is around 20 to 30 million according to reports, there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, because one of the issues that some people might have and sort of question is, you said it there, you could have him as a Bruno backup. We haven't got European football next season. Just looking at the immediate future, Bruno doesn't tend to get injured.
He plays every game.
Yeah, he plays every game. Do you still think there's value there for United in bringing in a player that potentially could be 30 million quid, which isn't pennies? I know it's relatively cheap compared to some of the other signings. Do you think there's still value there for Manchester United?
Yeah, I think it feels a bit wrong to view a signing as an asset.
That's fair enough.
But there is the angle that you could argue that even if he doesn't come in and instantly have an impact in the team, he still, because of his age and his potential, represents long-term, selling on value. You could sign him for 20-30 million. Maybe he doesn't hit the ground running, but still shows the quality, and then you sell him in a few years for 50-60 million. So there's that angle, but equally, I think he's definitely a player with the quality to play for a huge club like Manchester United in the midfield. Again, not someone that you'd pair with a Bruno Fernandes, but kind of a backup. I'd say, Adam Wharton at a stretch, you could probably pair next to Bruno Fernandes, because I think he's slightly more defensively polished than Hackney. I don't think there's a huge difference in their athleticism. They both cover ground quite well, but they're not elite at it like a Declan Rice or an Amadou Onana. But Wharton is more polished in terms of how he reads the game, anticipates what's around him, and kind of engages in duels. I think that's something that Hackney needs to polish as he goes on. But there's definitely a lot of potential there, and I wouldn't be surprised if he left this summer for a big club, and United could be a club that could benefit from that opportunity.
We saw what Adam Wharton did when he went from the Championship to Crystal Palace. Almost immediately made an impact. If Hackney was to go from the Championship to Manchester United and was called upon, and Ruben Amorim said, look, I'm going to give you a chance, do you think he's ready to make that step up, or do you think he needs to come in and maybe it'd take him a little while to get used to playing for a club the size of Manchester United and even the Premier League?
I think we talk a lot about players making the transition from abroad into the Premier League, but it's slightly different for the Championship. I think the translation rate is a lot higher, and it's a lot better of an indicator of how a player might come into a Premier League side. So I think Hackney has that in his favour, that he's got that experience playing in England at an incredibly high level. The Championship is still an
100%.
Insanely competitive league. And physically, he's I think he's up to the level where he could hold his own in the Premier League. I think whoever he does sign for, he could make that impact right now at a top club. I think he is ready for that.
One to keep an eye on, definitely. We'll see what happens on that front. And just even mentioning a midfielder in the same breath as Michael Carrick. I know he was his manager, but also he said about the comparisons, that gets me so excited. Who else do you want to talk about? I think you've got a goalkeeper on your list.
Yeah, lots of talk about United's goalkeeper situation this summer. No one really knows if Onana's going to stay or go.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I think the latest reports were that he's going to stay, and that Ruben Amorim actually likes him. But you never know, do you? And also,
there seems to be a soft spot there. But he's got a
and also pitch, with a young goalkeeper, there's always the potential, and not necessarily this is the case, but there's potential that he could come in as a backup, because I don't know if Bayandé is fancied by Amorim, because whenever he steps into the first team, he hasn't covered himself in glory, has he? He's always had one in him.
Straight out again.
Yeah, so you don't know what could happen if a young goalkeeper was to come into the squad. But who is it you want to talk about?
So Senne Lammens for Royal Antwerp is the goalkeeper in question. He's been linked to United a couple of times by James Ducker of The Telegraph and Simon Stone of the BBC. They've reported,
reliable guys.
Yeah, they've reported some interest early on in the window. I'm not sure if that would be as a first choice option or to come in for a backup for Onana or someone else. Emiliano Martinez has been linked as a first team option. But yeah, this is another young player that a lot of clubs around Europe and in England are keeping tabs on and see potential in. He's 6'3", 193 centimetres, and he's got the kind of physical profile and presence between the sticks that you'd look for in a top level goalkeeper. Statistically, the numbers look great. He made the most saves at 177 and the most goals prevented with 16.47 in the world last season out of all goalkeepers, across the top 5 leagues and below that. So statistically performs brilliantly. Goals prevented and saves made aren't always the most reliable indicators of a goalkeeper's ability, because it can just be how many shots your team concedes, but you can't take them as negatives. But the eye test kind of backs that up. He's a really, really mobile and kind of dynamic shot stopper. Has a lot of variety in the saves he makes, and kind of he can get down really quickly. He can move well despite his size. And he's a very kind of balanced profile for a goalkeeper, very complete. There have been, in terms of profile comparisons, similarities to Alisson that people have pointed out, where he can kind of do it all to a high level, unlike like an Ederson, who you think of as a kind of exclusively like a ball playing specialist. Lammens is kind of more of an all rounder. So yeah, really comfortable with the ball at his feet, expansive passing range, kind of does the lot. So yeah, he's been a mainstay at 22 for Antwerp, which is, you know, very young for a goalkeeper to become first choice for you know, quite a big club in the Belgian league.
100%.
So definitely some good signs there, and United have been reported to be interested. So,
do you see him? Is it feasible for him to go from, no disrespect, a 22-year-old kid at Royal Antwerp to the Manchester United starting goalkeeper? Could you see that happening?
It's always difficult with goalkeepers. We know they usually break through so much later, and it's so rare to see goalkeepers become first choice options for huge clubs. Yeah. Obviously, De Gea came in very young at United. How old was he?
19, 20.
Yeah.
But he'd had success at Atletico, hadn't he? He was regarded as the best young goalkeeper in the world, and I think. And from memory, so didn't even help them win the Europa League. I think he'd had they'd done well there.
Even he came in and made mistakes.
Yeah, and if you remember, there was a debate going on, a discussion whether it was going to be him or Anders Lindegaard at one point. In that first season, they were both sort of rotated, and Fergie, one of the rare occasions I've ever seen Sir Alex Ferguson do it with a player publicly, was quite critical of David De Gea at one point, and he said he might not be ready yet. Obviously, the rest is history. Yeah. So it can happen. You're right. I just think this is obviously a different animal as well. This Manchester United side. This isn't the Sir Alex Ferguson side that's winning Champions Leagues.
There's so much less stability there. The defensive line is quite young. You've got players like Lenny Yoro and Hayden Hackney getting a lot of minutes. Yeah. So there's not that wealth of experience across the whole back line to kind of support a young goalkeeper playing there. And just with the toxic environment at United, it's so up and down. I think it might not be the best time to bring in a 22-year-old goalkeeper, despite the many qualities that he'd bring. So it would kind of depend on whether he's willing to come in as a second choice option, maybe get opportunities in the cup competitions, in the Carabao Cup and FA Cup. Yeah. I think in terms of quality, he's probably not far off, but it's a lot more about kind of the mental aspect of being that young and playing as a first choice option. And it also depends, you know, if you're ready to be willing to have a goalkeeper that might make some mistakes and kind of understand that and move past that. So it depends on a lot of factors, but certainly one that we seem to be interested in.
So I believe there's a striker on the list you want to look at.
Yeah, obviously there's been a bit of a merry-go-round with United's striker situation as well. Victor Gyökeres has reportedly said that he prefers a move to Arsenal.
Loser.
Yeah, there's interest in Ekitike and Osimhen. Obviously, Delap went to Chelsea, who he originally
another loser.
Targeting. Yeah, exactly. And you know, speaking of Delap, Everton were in for him, but they have targeted Thierno Barry at Villarreal as a potential alternative. And I think he's one that a lot of clubs have an eye on. 22 years of age, plays for France's under-21s. Recently scored a 92nd plus 12 minute winner against Georgia.
Plus 12. Game's gone. 12 minutes of added time.
So definitely piqued the interest of fans in the last couple of weeks. And this is a player who is, again, a really kind of complete package. He's 6'4", really fast, mobile, he's strong, you know, holds off contact well, can kind of spin off a defender and go in behind. And so he represents a lot of the things that clubs would have looked at in a Liam Delap, or you know, many of the other strikers that people are looking at. He runs in behind relentlessly. That's one of the big things with him. Is he's kind of he's got these never-ending runs that stretch the opposition line and just kind of disorganises defences to be a real nuisance. So I think that's one of the big attractions, is for a club that need that physical presence up top. He can also hold it up and you know, pin a defender and kind of bring his teammates into play. So he does a bit of everything, and has, you know, really come into the spotlight for Villarreal this season in La Liga. And he kind of moves quite intelligently. He's got that box movement. So yeah, can do basically a bit of everything. So yeah, with United looking at Ekitike, who's reportedly going to cost 85 million, Thierno Barry has a release clause of 34 million, which is obviously a lot more affordable, and he's another player with a lot of potential, so definitely an alternative to keep in mind if United aren't able to agree a deal there.
The fact that he's 22, so he's not a complete youngster in the sort of Chido Obi sense of the word, playing for a big club like Villarreal and has that experience. Do you think he could fit in to a Manchester United team? Say we do get Mbomo, and we've already obviously got Mateus Cunha or maybe Ahmad as the 2 10s, or Mount. Do you think him leading the line in that setup works? Yeah,
I think it does. Functionally, he's the right profile for it. Something that Amorim needs in his striker is someone who is a great runner and someone who can run the channels and kind of be a nuisance in behind and stretch the opposition line. You had Carl Anker on a couple of weeks ago talking about this, how with the amount of touches that Cunha and Mbumo want, you need actually a striker who can maybe not be so engaged in possession and create that space for Cunha and Mbumo to play in and receive the ball to feet. And he's certainly someone that could do that. I think there's similarities to Mateta actually in the way Barry plays, but he's kind of maybe a more modern alternative to that and a really complete profile. So I could definitely see him coming in for United, although a lot of the clubs that he's been linked to are kind of a level below that, so Everton and Wolves and kind of a lot of the mid-table clubs, which obviously this season,
United finished. I get your point though.
Yeah.
Just quickly, there will be people out there that look at it and go, is this another gamble? Is this another Rasmus Højlund? Is this another player that's not quite proven at the very top level that we're asking to come and sort of United to take a punt on? Do you think there's any merit to that worry?
I understand the worries, and I feel like United as a fan base somewhat scarred by the whole Rasmus Højlund situation. He obviously played. We paid a huge fee for him. He came in with a lot of promise, and he needed to hit the ground running and be an immediate option in the first team. And obviously that hasn't happened for him, hasn't worked out, and if anything, he's regressed since he signed. So I think a lot of people are wary, especially when it comes to strikers, about signing someone who isn't, a guaranteed hit. But people talk about being, a ready-made goal scorer and a guaranteed hit. I don't think that exists in this market outside of Victor Osimhen. I think he is the only striker that you could say, without doubt, would come into almost any team and score a certain amount of goals for you. And so that's why I kind of I don't consider it to be that much of a gamble, because I think it's going to be a gamble regardless based on United's situation. So what you can do is look at the qualities that he brings and kind of identify the tangible reasons that he could do a job for United. And I think when you look at that in terms of his strength and physicality, the technical qualities, his finishing and general centre forward play, I think he's a good option if United aren't able to secure a deal, say, for Ekitike.
One to keep an eye on again, and there's a good chance United can't secure a deal for Ekitike, so we may end up looking at players like Barry or players of that sort of ilk. There's another player you want to talk about as well. I think this is a Belgian lad.
Yes, the Belgian Zeno Debast. Obviously, with Ruben Amorim, a lot of people have been thinking about which players would he like to bring from Sporting, if any. Obviously we were linked closely to Giovanni Kenda, who went to Chelsea, and Gyökeres, which is looking less likely at this point in the season. But another player that kind of goes under the radar that had success at Sporting under Amorim is Debast. Belgian centre-back come midfielder. He's become a prominent figure in the Belgian national team at just 22, which is pretty impressive.
Got a decent team, hasn't he, as well, Belgium?
Yeah, exactly, and he's a starting centre-back, which isn't easy. He's really kind of versatile, can play as a defender. He usually played as that right centre-back in Amorim's back three.
Right.
But at a certain point, he transitioned into playing in the midfield because he possesses a lot of the kind of possession, the qualities in possession that you'd need to be comfortable playing in that midfield. He pushed up there and didn't really look out of place under Amorim. He's got a very expansive passing range, comfortable evading pressure in the first phase, and so he would offer some real versatility. He would obviously offer cover for right centre back and central centre back. But if we were looking for a partner for someone like a Bruno Fernandes or a Hayden Hackney, he's more the profile that you'd be looking at in terms of someone that can cover the ground, make interventions and interceptions and ball recoveries in the midfield. He kind of profiles well for that.
How much would he cost, and do you think United would be willing to spend it on him?
This one is a little bit more difficult to tell because he only recently signed for Sporting, so I think he's got a few years left on his contract. So I think in Debast you'd be looking at a slightly higher fee than the others on this list, maybe closer to 45, 50 million. But I think in a defensive midfielder who could be ready to come in and do a job right now, it's going to be really difficult to pay much less than that, unless you find like a real gem out of nowhere. If you're looking for someone that's kind of done it under Ruben Amorim, knows the role, has that versatility, I would pay the money for someone like him. He's 6'3" as well, so he matches the physical profile that we're after. Good in the air,
Yeah, you're gonna, like you said about mixing it up, and I think there's going to be certain players that are going to be a lot cheaper, and the ones that are sort of the 10 to 20 million, and then at some point, even if it is a younger player, you are going to have to push the boat out a little bit. Manchester United can't sort of progress and get to where we need to be by only spending sort of 20, 30 million. Now, we have obviously spent a decent amount of money on Matheus Cunha. We're also going to go out and do that. It would seem on Bryan Mbeumo. Maybe there's scope for another big signing. Maybe there is scope for a signing that is the 40-odd million pound mark, which isn't that amazing in this day and age.
Yeah, I'd say there's kind of three categories that United are recruiting in. So there's emerging talents, so that's Hayden Hackney, Chido Obi, Diego Leon, Sekou Kone, that profile of player usually cost 1-2 million at most, and they're 17, 18 years of age, so they're definitely for the future. Sometimes you'll be surprised by one like Hayden Hackney who comes straight into the first team. And then you've got your second category, which I think is around the 20 to maybe 40 million mark, where still young potential talents, but have a little bit more of a premium because they've already proved it in first team football. And then your Cunhas and your Mbumos, who are kind of the top range of fees. I think he fits in the middle, Debast, as do a lot of players on this list, where they actually have shown that they can do it, and that's why they command a little bit of a higher fee, like Patrick Dorgu, but still offer that kind of long-term potential. So yeah, I think definitely a category of signing that Ineos will be looking closely at.
It'd be interesting to see what United do when it comes to midfield, because there was talk one that we would go for a midfielder. We would be looking at maybe a 6 or an 8 type of midfielder. It's gone a little bit quiet because all the focus has obviously been on Bryan Mbeumo and potentially Ekitike, or even a few stories doing the rounds about Emi Martinez or Victor Gyökeres. Not really hearing much on the midfielder front. So
yeah, I think I've got a feeling that next summer we'll focus a lot of the funds into the midfield. But
I think this summer
it feels like the market's a little bit flat in terms of a real kind of top end option. The club would definitely look at someone like a Carlos Baleba or Adam Wharton, but I think given the financials this summer, it's just not possible.
No. One last player you want to talk about, a centre-back, a young centre-back.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about him.
This one, I'm not sure if I could see United going for. There haven't really been any links, and he's closely linked to other clubs, but he's a young player that I love and that I think would be a great player for United to target. So I've included him anyway. It's Christhian Mosquera, Valencia centre-back, right-footed. 6'3", absolutely rapid.
What are they feeding these players? Why is every youngster at least a Joe Smith height? Yeah. Like, what is going on here?
In him, I see a lot of the similarities to Dean Howson, not in terms of their profile as a centre-back, but in terms of the kind of value that they represent and the market opportunity. Because, looking back at Howson's market value when he was at Juventus before going to Bournemouth, clubs were aware that he was ready to move for 15 million. And the fact that only Bournemouth came in for him and actually got the deal done was incredible. And I see a similar thing happening here with Mosquera. He's rumoured to be able to leave for 20 to 25 million euros if he doesn't renew his contract this summer, because he's set to leave next summer when his contract expires. And yet there's no huge club going in for him that could definitely benefit from a player of his profile. I think he's got real kind of top end potential as a centre back. He's different to Howson in terms of being a kind of defending first centre back, which feels funny to say.
Crazy that a defender would focus on defending.
Yeah,
game's gone.
He's kind of perfect for like a high line, so he's got that recovery pace to play really high up the pitch. If a team breaks in behind, he can make that recovery and get back really quickly. He is also good on the ball, can carry aggressively into the final third and has an expansive passing range, as Amorim wants in his wide centre-backs. That's definitely where I'd put him, kind of the right side of that back three. But yeah, he actually played the most minutes in Europe's top 5 leagues for any under 21 player last season. So definitely got that experience. Wouldn't be surprised if he makes his way into Spain's first national team, in the near future. So yeah, RB Leipzig and both Milan clubs have been linked to him this summer. So it does seem like he might be on the move, but I would love United to swoop, because I think it's a real top-end market opportunity here.
Do you think the problem, or do you have any concerns around him coming to United and not being that first teamer? Do you think that could be an issue for maybe him or for his development, or do you think he could come in and be a first teamer?
I think he could, but obviously United do have a wealth of centre-backs at the moment. That's kind of the one area of the team that feels like we don't really need a signing this summer. The only reason I've included him is because I think if you see a market opportunity that represents real top-end potential, long-term, and the right kind of profile that we're looking for a relatively cheap price, sometimes you sign a player who doesn't necessarily fit the squad dynamics just yet, because you might not be able to have that opportunity in the coming seasons. And I think so that's what he represents for me. But that is a valid concern. Would he get minutes this season? I think he's good enough. But with Maguire, Yoro, De Ligt, Mazraoui, possibly Delot, Lisandro Martinez coming back, we've got a lot of options. So maybe a centre-back won't be the priority for United, but he's just a player that I've really enjoyed watching.
No, the annoying thing is with United, right, you might end up ignoring a player like, you think we've got loads of options centre-back, and me and you will be sat here in October talking about how we've got 8 injuries to centre-backs, and now we're having to play Frederiksen every single game because there's no one else available. Because United's injury record, especially when it comes to centre-backs, is horrendous.
And with his availability, having played so many minutes, 37 La Liga appearances last season.
Which is ridiculous for a player who's just 19. But on paper, you go, well, there is all those players. And also, if you're his agent or you're him, you're looking at it, you're going, well, I'll go to United. I might be 6th choice. Is that going to cut it for me? Just before I let you go, there's someone you want to give an honourable mention to?
Just an honourable mention, kind of similar to Mosquera in that there haven't been very close links, but just a player that I've really loved watching. Couldn't be signed anyway until January 2026.
Can we just get that again, right? I want to give Finney Single. Just repeat what you've said here, because I know, regardless of the fact you've just said it, people will comment, we can't sign him anyway. Say it again, so it's clear.
So we can't possibly sign him until January 2026.
Thank you.
Because he's 17, he turns 18 later in the year. So this would, if it were to happen, it would be for January or next summer, maybe a pre-agreement would be reached. A lot of clubs are kind of working around this Brexit regulation by just agreeing the deals verbally early on. So Chelsea have done it with pretty much everyone they've signed. So it's possible that maybe an agreement could be reached early. But it's Ayyoub Bouaddi, plays for Lille, so obviously Lenny Yoro's previous club, and a French setup that just churn out talent. He's a midfielder that's been touted as Lille's biggest talent since Eden Hazard. Well,
that's for starters, that's wrong. Because Lille's biggest talent since Eden Hazard is Lenny Yoro.
Well, yeah, definitely. It goes to show how highly he's rated, and Lenny Yoro has been talked about as a generational defender, possibly the best in Europe. So definitely high praise. But yeah, he's broken into the first team at 16. He became the youngest appearance maker in a UEFA Club Cup competition at 16 years and 3 days old.
That's insane.
Especially for a defensive midfielder.
He's almost 15 and he's playing in Europe for a top club.
He's had a kind of similar breakthrough as Camavinga, who obviously came through with a lot of hype himself. I still am heartbroken at the fact that United were in advanced talk to sign him.
I remember sitting in the old studio upstairs on a paper talk, and it looked like that deal could happen. And I was so excited because everyone I'd spoke to that had watched him a lot and from what I'd seen, he just was raving about him, and he thought this could be the answer to our problems for the next 10, 15 years.
For me, I can't remember quite as much excitement for a signing as that, because like Lenny Yoro, he was touted as possibly the best in his position coming up through in Europe. I think he's done really well at Real Madrid, not necessarily established himself as a kind of bona fide world-class player, but there's still years to go in his career, and still an option that United could massively benefit from. And I think Bouaddi is another chance at securing a market opportunity like Camavinga, like Lenny Yoro, that real top-end potential that all the big European clubs will be looking at. He's a kind of tall, elegant midfielder. He started as a number 10, but as he grew, he kind of matured into a deeper, more defensive-minded player. And yeah, it's not necessarily the most realistic option for United. I'm sure there are bigger priorities, and he would probably cost a somewhat hefty fee for his age, maybe 30 to 40 million, slightly less than Lenny Yoro. But I thought I'd just include him because I think he's going to be, a really prominent player in Europe in the coming years. So.
January, we'll be back and we'll be talking about how United.
I just want some links. Just links.
Nice. Just give us a tickle.
I don't care if they're true.
Yeah. Just, you know what? We'll have a Fihaji's link. We will. We'll have someone like them saying, or the Metro gossip roundup. Yeah. We'll have anything. Just give us a link with that youngster. Finn, always a pleasure, never a chore. We'll keep an eye on all those players and all the others. You're always updating on socials. You're letting us know who United should be looking at, who we could be looking at, what's going on. So make sure you check out Academy Scoop on all your socials. That's been Finn. I've been Jay. This has been a bit of a scouting report on some potential youngsters United could be looking at. Thanks for watching.